Hi there and welcome to this episode of Cervello Live. I'm your host Chris Dames, hope you're doing well, and this is the show designed to talk about all things money and work and business related, and we have a bunch of amazing guests who turn up every week and talk to me about what they do and share insights that you can use in your life and business to help you move forward, however that looks like for you. And this week we've got a lady called Lisa Seagroatt. Lisa's runs a HR business. She talks about her journey in business and what she's learnt throughout the way, but also how leaders of business can manage teams better. And what I want to do is talk about, before we get to the interview with Lisa, I want to talk a little bit about the financial risks business owners take that they need to deal with today. Now, the reason that I'm talking about this is not only because we've got Lisa on the show and it felt like an important thing to talk about, but also I've been doing some work with some new clients that have come and joined us at Cervello, joined the Cervello family recently, where we've seen their business owners, and we've seen some gaps in what they're doing and what they should actually do that we've helped fill during our engagement. So part of the reason that I'm talking about this is because we've been learning lessons through what some business owners take for granted and what we know is right. So I just want to share some of those ideas. So 4 financial risks business owners should consider today. And number 1 is make sure that if you're running a business and you might be one director, you might have 2 or 3 directors, make sure that when you're running a business, you're in a position where the directors and the directors' families are protected if the worst should occur. So when we talk about the worst, we typically talk about death and we typically talk about serious illness and what happens to your value in the business if you were to die. Because typically what happens is the shares go to whoever you've put in your will, or typically your closest family. That typically happens. Shares are owned by the family. They may want to get involved in the business, but the likelihood is they may not. And that's a conversation that's important to have either way. But if they don't, has the money, as the business, the remaining directors got enough money to buy the shares of the family? Now, potentially there might be money in the business that potentially could be used, but the likelihood is most businesses wouldn't want to take out a big chunk of their money to buy the shares of a surviving director. And typically what should happen is that the surviving directors should want to buy that share of the business back. And the reason that I'm talking about this is because what we do see often is that business owners identify this as a risk, put life cover in place, but don't set it up properly. And what tends to happen is that they've got the shares of the business going to the surviving spouse, and the life cover, not written in a business trust, and it should be written in a business trust, also going to the surviving spouse. And that doesn't solve the problem. What you need is the money going to the director so they can buy the shares off of the family of the deceased director, and the shares going to the family. And then what you need as well is something called a cross-option agreement. And it needs to be a cross-option agreement for the purposes of tax, to make sure that that's a robust arrangement. Now, why am I talking about this? Because of the fact that what you want to do is make sure that in the event of the worst thing occurring to you or either any of your fellow directors, you've got arrangements in place that make it easy for the remaining directors to carry on running the business and easy for your family. Certainly in a time of grieving, you don't want to be in a position where you make life harder for either your business partners or fellow directors or the ones you love. And it's really important to get the right arrangements in place to make sure that you can move forward and progress. And the arrangements that we've been seeing recently on a couple of occasions haven't been set up particularly well. So even if you're a director of a business who thinks that they've got the life cover in place and everything is sorted, check the trust arrangements with your legal representative, check the life cover and the trust on the life cover with your financial planner, and make sure you've got the right cover in place. One really important thing as well is if you've got life cover in place to protect your share of a business, but you haven't reviewed it recently, what we've also seen in a couple of recent cases is the value of the business has gone up, and the cover that was in place previously wouldn't give the family a fair amount to reflect the actual value of the business now. So when was the last time you reviewed that, even if you've got your life cover in place? If you've got no life cover in place to protect your value of the business for your family and your surviving directors, you really need to speak to somebody about making sure that that's the case. So that's the first thing I do. Make sure that you've got cover in place so that the directors and the directors' families, surviving directors and the directors' family are protected. Second thing that a lot of businesses neglect, particularly as they grow, is the impact of the loss of a key person. And a key person might be one of the directors of the business, or it might be a key individual who the business just wouldn't run as well without. Now, certainly what I'd be looking at if I was asked to come into a business to look at this is who are your key people and what are the financial implications of losing that key person. Because what you've got is potentially, if they're a relationship builder and they're responsible for commercial contracts, there's a potential loss of revenue if they die or they're not here anymore. There's potential loss of revenue. There's the cost of recruiting somebody new. There's the time it takes in training somebody up, and there's the loss of profits while you're doing all that. So certainly, one thing that we'd recommend all business owners do is take a look at who their key people are and look at, if the worst were to occur, how you'd make sure that the business could continue and the impact on the business of the loss of that individual is minimised as much as possible. Now, the good news is that if the relationship between the key person and the employee is employee-employee, and there's a couple of other rules you need to consider, the potential is that any protection you put in place can be seen as a expense of the business, and therefore you have a bit of a corporation tax saving on anything you put in play. But that won't apply to directors of the business because the relationship isn't solely employer-employee. But really important, you've got key people in the business. You need to make sure that you're in a position where if the worst were to occur, you were in a position where they'd be looked after. So that's number 2, protect your key people. Number 3, and one we see quite a lot, is link your personal aspirations to your business goals. So we all get sort of stuck in terms of what we want to do with our business, and we've had clients come in, and typically our clients are looking at what's next and have built up a level of financial wealth that allows them to look at what's next. And we get a lot of comments saying, I wish I would have done this 3 years ago, or I wished I would have focused on this when I was building my business, because I might have got the balance between work and life a little bit more differently. What I like to do when I'm working with a client is just make sure that when they're looking back, they've got as few regrets as possible. And often those regrets aren't around money, they're around how we spend our time. And certainly linking your personal goals to your business goals allows you to do that, and allows you to not only plan what your business looks like over the next 5 to 10 years, but how that fits into the life you want to live over the short, medium and longer term. That's really, really important to do. And as I say, a lot of us get stuck so much in making the business successful, we don't get a successful balance in our own lives. And certainly that's true with business owners, including me. I've not always got the balance right. I don't think you ever get the balance perfect, and I'm certainly not there. But moving towards being conscious of what you want personally as well as what you want for the business, and what success looks like for you personally, because that's not only about money, is important to make sure that you make strategic decisions. So that's number 3. Number 4 is building resilience. So what we've found over the past few months since COVID is people's resilience in business has been tested. And it's not only resilience in business, it's resilience personally. And that's emotionally, because we've all gone through quite a tough time in terms of coping with what's going on. But what can make it worse is not having the financial resilience. So not having enough of an emergency fund personally, or in your business. So can your business and you personally cope with the financial shocks that COVID brought? Could it cope with another financial shock that may or may not happen? It's important to make sure that both in your business and personally you can build financial resilience. That typically looks like having a bit of spare cash, making sure that you're keeping enough spare cash to sort of cope with the bumps. But it could also mean looking at your business and saying, how do we make sure that we're diversified enough to ensure that if we did need some spare money or income, income would continue regardless of what would happen to other elements of the business. And they're the 4 things that if I was advising a business owner, I'd focus on. Number 1, in the event of a death of a shareholder, would the other shareholders continue to run the business and the family be able to be fairly looked after financially? Number 2, are all the key people in the business protected? And that's not only directors, that's employees as well. And in the event of the worst occurring, in the event of premature death of an individual the business is reliant on, can the business cope and continue in the same way? Number 3, is your financial plan, your personal financial plan, linked to your business financial plan? Because those 2 things should be interlinked. And number 4, has your business got enough resilience? Like, can it cope if the worst were to occur? And have you got that personally? Have you got enough of a pot of money that might be accessible to make sure that if the worst were to occur, you'd be okay? They're my 4 tips for business owners. Next, we're going to talk about how to look after people, and we're going to go to our interview with Lisa. Hope you enjoy. Lisa, thank you so much for joining us on Cervello Live. How are you today?
I'm fine, thank you, Chris. Yeah, coping, as we all are.
Good, yeah, it's a weird time, isn't it? Let's be honest. And I think to ignore the challenges would be disingenuous, because we're all going through them. But certainly, I'm glad to hear you're coping. Now, I know all about you, but our audience don't. So tell us a little bit about you.
Okay, so I'm Lisa Seagroatt. My company is HR Fit for Purpose, and I've been running this now for 3 years. It's an HR consultancy dealing with all kinds of HR issues. And for myself, I've been practicing HR now for probably about 20 years, alongside sort of operational business stuff as well. So I've done both in my lifetime. So, I've come from a background of where I was managing services and an HR function. So, I can join the two together, Chris, I think it's fair to say.
I think most HR people can, right? Because it comes with an element of operations, most people who do HR in firms, right?
Yeah, it's really, well, you say that. There are some people practice HR where they've had no exposure to ops, but if you've had exposure to the operational side of business, I think that's so much better, because then you can join up all the dots and you don't start punching stuff out from your department saying you've got to do this and you have to do that because it's a policy and a procedure, etc., which we love to produce in HR because that's what we do. But if you understand the operational side, then you can work with your colleagues to make sure what you actually say needs to be done is practically deliverable.
Yeah.
Sometimes isn't. So, I mean, for me, I think that's a real benefit to have that experience, because then you can work much more
pragmatically.
And bring about the right outcome for the business at the end of the day, in terms of these policies and procedures do actually work in practice rather than just a bit of paper that sits in the file.
Yeah, 100%. Yeah, it's about having that sort of, a business exists because it does what it does well, and you sometimes you've got to mix that with doing it right in terms from a policy and procedure perspective.
Exactly.
Completely get that. So before we start talking about the business, tell me about you. I know you're married, you've got a daughter. How old's your daughter?
Yeah, my daughter's 18, so she's at college at the moment, just finishing her second year in a BTEC in creative media studies, sort of photography, videography and that kind of thing. So she's hopefully off to uni next year. I also have two very grown-up stepsons who are in their 30s, and at last count, 9 grandchildren. So,
blimey.
And my daughter, obviously 18, has no children yet. So we don't know what the final number's going to be.
Yeah, it could be anything, couldn't it? You just don't know. Now you've got me curious. How old do the grandkids start and end from age-wise?
Okay, so my eldest grandson is 14, and my youngest grandchildren, who were born in March, literally before the world went crazy. The twins were born this year, so they're sort of 7 months now. So, and regretfully, we haven't been able to see much of them because of, various restrictions. We've seen them, then we haven't. It's like, so it's
yeah, you know what I mean. It's a weird one, because I've sort of got the opposite problem. Like, my two girls are 8 and 16, and we get to see them every day, and that's amazing. My dad's in his early 70s, and because of what's been going on, typically we'd go out once a month for a drink or a meal or something that we'd see each other, and that's just completely not happened during the last few months. And it's certainly one of the tougher things, not seeing the people you love as often as you like. Definitely.
Yes, absolutely. And we're quite fortunate in the fact that obviously you probably guessed, we're both on our second marriage, so. This is why we've got a blended family, but we also have this rather unique situation where Rebecca's granddad, which is my ex-husband's father, is actually in our support bubble.
Right.
So, so we are quite a hybrid mixture as a family.
Yeah.
Because that's the nature of our relationship. I suppose I've always been close to him like a daughter, so it was the most natural thing for him to join our bubble.
100%.
And he's 85 on Monday, so I'm hoping we can do something to mark that. Although we have been up in a helicopter with him last month to celebrate his 85th birthday.
Oh, cool. Where did you fly?
Somewhere around Essex. Where were we? Can't remember the name of it now. There's just 10 minutes up in a helicopter around. You could see all of the Docklands, but it was in the countryside, in the Essex countryside. So it was near Grays. It was out that way.
So does Dammins Hall all sit? Right. Okay. So I've done a
showground.
Right, I've done there's one near me in Upminster called Dammins Hall Aerodrome, and Cassie a couple of years ago bought me a flying lesson, which was amazing. It was like a little two-seater. Went up with this guy, so it flew around, and again you could see Docklands, but you could also see the other way out to like the coast. It's like a really amazing view, and when I got down. When I got down, there was a little cafe there, so we had a bit of breakfast. And we saw this, I mean, this was a couple of years ago now, we saw this crowd gathering outside. And we were like, okay, what's going on? And like, what are they looking at? And we've seen this plane land and realised that somebody was wing walking on the top. And we've seen this lady get off. And realised that she was a little bit older, and she was doing it, Lisa, for her 80th birthday present. Now, I don't know. I'm 43, and I don't know whether I'm that brave, but at 80 to do that. So yeah, she definitely deserved the credit. Yeah, definitely. So we've talked.
That's amazing.
Yeah. So we've talked a little bit about you. I know HR Fit for Purpose has been running for 3 years. Help me out sort of understand the clients you work with.
Well, we've got a range of clients. I mean, I set out initially, really, to work with clients, I suppose, that traditionally had high absence and high turnover of staff, because really my aim was to work with businesses that needed help with maybe bringing that down and looking at what was going on in the business that was causing high absenteeism and high turnover. And quite often there's something going on with the culture that causes that. However, over the course of time, the clients I've been working with have become really mixed. I mean, I initially thought I was going to be working with people like that. Then I was working with a lot of small, medium enterprises through my female founders role, because working with lots of other women that are just starting out and wanting to get those building blocks for their HR right from the start, so they recruit the right people and they know how to look after them and create a healthy culture. And then, I've been approached by people like London Fire Brigade and National Fire and Rescue, who I've done a huge piece of work around their volunteering strategy across the whole of the UK, in terms of looking after volunteers, how to keep them engaged. It's the same kind of stuff, but in a different way. So I've got a real mixture. I've even got one client now that I've just taken on that's international retail company. So, I thought it was always going to be the high absenteeism and the high turnover clients, maybe in the care sector potentially, because that does suffer quite a bit with that. But there's no kind of one size fits all here. I've got a real diverse mixture.
And I think the nature of business is that it evolves over time, doesn't it? I mean, certainly when we set up sort of 12 years ago, our client bank now and continues to change as your reputation builds and your sort of network builds. The sort of clients you work with changes and evolves. One really interesting thing is that volunteering aspect that you mentioned, because I suppose a lot of people don't consider HR for volunteers, but certainly if you've got people in your business, regardless of whether they're employees or not, there's always going to be those HR opportunities and challenges, right?
Absolutely, Chris. And the thing, what often happens as well is, and this is some of the work that I've been doing with sort of inspiring women and female founders in my seminars, is that it doesn't matter whether someone's volunteering, employed, or a subcontractor in your business. Your duty of care under health and safety is exactly the same, because they're people that are working for you or volunteering for you. Whether it's on your premises or away from your premises, you still have to look after them.
Yeah.
And that's quite often what gets missed, is that people don't actually realise, quite genuinely don't realise, that responsibility is exactly the same, and that's kind of why you need to be clear about policies and procedures. And I don't mean rigid. You wouldn't necessarily have your volunteering policies looking the same as your employment ones, but there has to be a similarity there in terms of looking after people, and also making sure that they know what their boundaries are, so they feel safe in terms of what they're doing for you.
Yeah,
So,
100%.
I've done a lot of work around that, which kind of, it is an aside to HR, but there's still people.
Yeah.
It's still people stuff. So
Yeah.
it's no different for me.
And in terms of culture, it doesn't matter what the contract says, right? It's like it's the culture of your business that's the starting point, regardless of whether they're volunteers, employees, or contractors.
Exactly, and that's what I mean. When you're asking about the type of clients and stuff, at the end of the day, for me, there's a culture in every single business. It doesn't matter which industry, sector, or wherever you are, however large or small you are. There's a culture normally driven from the top. So anyone that's approached me that we've worked with, if they're looking to improve the culture, it doesn't matter to me which industry they come from. If they're thinking along those lines in terms of either we want to get it right from start or we want to improve our culture to drive down some of this turnover that's going on, which is very expensive and disruptive to business, then I'll work with them, because we're coming from the same page straight away, and that's amazing. I'm very happy to work with people like that.
It's really interesting. I've changed my mind about culture. So here's my theory about culture now and what it was then. So I come from a big I used to work with big organisations, and culture was just always the words they used to put on the wall and effectively ignore. So when I started my business, that preconceived idea of culture being lip service came from the experiences that I've had in corporate. And what I've realised now is, particularly in our small team of 8 people, culture is fundamentally important, because it's why you get up in the morning. And our culture is all about our values are just the stuff that I try and teach the kids. So work with clients you like, have fun every day. So fun's one. Always be transparent and fair. Never stop learning, and do well and do good. And I think my mind has changed about values, because I used to have this perception that it didn't matter, but now I think it does. And how do you counteract that, particularly in big organisations? Because it's harder to enforce culture in those firms, isn't it?
It is. It's not. The more layers and the bigger it gets, then of course you get mini cultures developing within departments. So culture, Chris, it's driven from the top. I've worked with an exceptionally good leader when I was in the charitable sector. He drove the culture from the top, and we were quite a large organisation. I'm not talking hundreds of staff, but what you kind of need is your leadership to set the tone around the culture. So there's nothing he would never have done if we were out at an event, for example. He was never someone that stood in the background. He would always lead from the front.
Gotcha.
So then what you then want is the next layer down, your sort of management team that are supporting that, to also do the same. And I'm not, we're not robots. You can't just churn the people off a conveyor belt and make them all into mini leaders that, like, the one at the top. But if you lead from the top and you set that tone with the culture, and you show that this is how you're going to do it, then 9 times out of 10, generally, people will follow, because they are inspired by that kind of leadership, and be true for their own team. So it should filter down, but it's not. It is quite difficult. The harder, the bigger you are as an organisation or a company, then the harder it will be. But it's not impossible, as long as you practice what you preach, because that's exactly what you just referred to. It's slapped on the wall. This is our vision and our values, and nobody conforms to it.
No.
So your culture's not going to be particularly good if that's the case, because people think, it's just a bit of paper on the wall, I don't need to take any notice, because no one at the top does.
Well, that was part of the challenge in some of the organisations. It's like, this is our values, but some of the decisions they made weren't aligned to those values, so you became cynical about it. And I think you're right. I think it's dependent on the leaders to live those values, isn't it? It's
absolutely,
just
absolutely. And then everybody tends to follow. I know that from having a great team of people that worked for me 5-6 years ago. That we had very low turnover, very low sickness. because people wanted to come and work in that environment. Because you have what I've always called, you have your work family and you have your home family. And of course you have all different dynamics at work, and you have just the same as you do in an average family. But if you all work together as a team and you're led properly in the workplace, then 9 times out of 10 you will find that people will want to come to work and give their best to what they're doing.
Cool. So talk to me a little bit about, because I look at your website and I was looking at some elements that you focus on. Tell me a little bit about the Opus Programme. How does that work?
Okay, so right back at the beginning, when I was playing around with what am I going to do, how am I going to use my expertise to help other people, we created the Opus Programme, which essentially is a training and development approach to people who need some support, such as coaching, mentoring, training into line management. Because I'm sure Chris, as well as I do, that people get promoted on their career path, which isn't great. If you've got the ability to progress, no reason why you shouldn't be promoted at all, and I think that's amazing. However, what we often do is we promote people and then we give them 20 people to manage as part of their team, because it goes with the new job. And then you've got people often caught like rabbits in the headlights because they don't know how to manage people. They're actually quite fearful and worried about it. So we kind of throw them to the lions in some respects, which is really unkind. Because it's great to be promoted, but if you need another set of skills to help you with that, then that's what we should be addressing. And the Opus Programme was designed to do that. So I have delivered some elements of it to different businesses, because you can kind of pick out of it what you want. But really, it's designed to sort of take line managers from the beginning of that line management journey right through the programme to help them understand policies and procedures and how to feel confident acting within them. And most importantly, how to build a team. So how to actually work with people, understand human dynamics, how things work around the table, how to get the best out of people, so that your line management experience is not one of pain. It's actually quite fun.
Yeah.
It's quite fun leading a team. If you can get that ethos right and get to know your people really well, then you can lead them quite comfortably. But you've got to have that confidence to step over the line to be able to do it. So that was the Opus Programme is designed to do.
I think the other interesting point on that is assuming that because somebody's good at a particular job, there's an assumption that they'll be good at managing people who do that job, and that's not always the case, is it?
No, because not all of us are natural leaders. Yeah. You need to kind of have a bit of natural leadership element in you, in your psyche, to make you feel, okay, this is great, I've got my promotion, and wow, now I've got this team of 20 people, can't wait to get to know them. Not everybody will feel like that. They'll be completely terrified of the thought of, and this unfortunately sometimes is where problems occur, as in then they don't know how to manage people, and then we start to get that sort of pushback from others in the team, and then the culture starts to go a bit quirky, then you see people going sick, and the rest speaks for itself.
Gotcha. So tell me a little bit, and I know you've mentioned it a couple of times. Tell me a little bit about the Inspiring Women programme, because I know that you've been involved with that for a little while now.
Yes, I have. I mean, the roots of that go back about 4 years now, when I very first sort of came back down to earth after stepping away from the charitable sector because the job had made me quite ill, and I had to think about, right, what am I going to do now, because I was in my mid-40s, certainly no chance of retiring or anything so fancy at that age, so I thought, right, I need to do something. So anyway, I went along to a local business centre, Enterprise Enfield, and sat in a seminar one Saturday morning about starting up your own business. And whilst I was there, I picked up this leaflet around Inspiring Women programme, and I stuck it on the side in the kitchen because, it was coming up to Christmas and there was mountains of Christmas cards and thousands of things to do. And it sat there until about February the following year, when I thought, oh, why not that leaflet, grab that leaflet, went along to an initial sort of presentation on it, and the rest was history really. I was accepted onto the programme. You got 12 hours, 12 weeks I think it was, or 12 hours support. So it's like a 3-month programme for women, free, for those women that were not yet registered with their business but had a business idea or wasn't quite sure what they wanted to do, and it was a safe space to go and discuss it, and then they give you support to help you manage your finances, do projections. Just incredible, brilliant program. And that was kind of how I started out with that. And as consequence of that, I was then asked if I would like to go on the Female Founder Accelerator program, which was funded by JP Morgan Chase Foundation, which I then completed. And I'm now known as a female founder ambassador to encourage other women to take up the Inspiring Women program or to go into business with support from the Enterprise Enfield Business Hub. So that's it, essentially.
You know what's interesting? I think, and I would say this as the dad of 2 daughters, but I think more women should be, number one, stepping up into those leadership roles, but also looking at more entrepreneurial options, because it then gives you more freedom, right?
Yes, it does, and obviously I speak to a lot of women that are looking to go into business, and a lot of it is around the sort of freedom and the work-life balance and looking after the kids and having something that fits in around the family life, etc., etc. So, an Enterprise Enfield is one of the few places out there that's running free programs for women at the moment, because the funding's getting less and less and less over time. So I was just very lucky to be, I suppose, in the right place at the right time. To be able to access all of that. And then I went on last year and applied for a tender. They invited me to tender for an HR contract with them. So I've now gone completely full circle. I've been through all their programs. I've come out the other end as a female founder ambassador. Now I'm going back in and doing seminars with women who were in my position, like I was 4 years ago. I'm now helping them with the HR elements, based on whether they've got employees, volunteers, subcontractors, whoever they're looking to use in their business as part of that journey.
100%.
So it's quite weird, really, but I have come full circle.
Yeah, 100%.
So now I'm one of the advisors.
So you're now teaching the next stage of enterprising leaders. That's amazing stuff.
Quite funny, really.
You know what? I think the other point I was going to make was one of the benefits I've found from setting up my business, and it was tough in the early days, not so much now as we're growing, but as we've grown a bit, but tough in the early days. But one of the things that I've loved as a dad is being able to walk my girls to school every now and again and seeing them grow and being home for dinner. Do you know what I mean? It's the simple stuff that allows you that flexibility. And I can't pretend it's all been smooth sailing. There's been headaches along the way, but certainly that freedom of time has been really important. Tell me a little bit about the biggest thing you've learned from the program you've been on.
I think, at the beginning, my confidence was really affected by, I've been through this mental health breakdown, and I'd really, really gone to the bottom. So, when I started the program, I was very anxious and nervous, and, I thought, I didn't even really know what I was doing there, to be honest, other than I need to do something with all this knowledge, but, have I still got it, essentially? And I think being on the program challenged me quite considerably in terms of, meeting other people who we all come from very different backgrounds with very different stories to tell. But, having talked to other women about my own experience and what led me down that path of setting up my own business, I think it taught me that actually there's no barrier to what I'm doing. It was only me putting it there, because that program just opens up opportunities for you that you just don't even realise that you are capable of even considering as an individual, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Because when your confidence has been affected, you're scared to do anything anymore.
Yeah.
And that kind of peeled back those layers and allowed me, especially the Female Founders Accelerator Programme, I mean, you know, being sent into JP Morgan and being allocated a business mentor, it is quite, you know, you sit there and you think, how did this happen? I'm not quite sure how I got here. But that kind of opened my eyes and made me realise that there was something worth looking at with my business idea. Otherwise, I wouldn't have been sat round the table in the first place.
And I suppose the other thing is as well, it like puts paid to some of those limiting beliefs, doesn't it? Do you know what I mean? We're like the internal things that we have inside ourselves that says we can't do it, and when we're given the opportunity to, we can.
Suddenly do. I mean, I never, for example, you know, at the same time as I started the Female Founders Programme, which is literally 3 years ago last week, funnily enough, I, you know, met my mentor, and I'm still in touch with him now, and seen him later on today. But I'd put myself forward. I really pushed myself out of my comfort zone and put myself forward for a teaching role. To teach an HR qualification, and that day I went to JP Morgan for the Female Founders meeting, the first one. I was then going that afternoon to Westminster Kingsway College to meet the programme leader of the HR unit to see if, you know, I could do the teaching. And believe it or not, 3 years on, after feeling absolutely terrified and in the taxi on the way thinking, what am I doing? I've never taught HR, what am I better doing? I'm still doing it.
Amazing. Love it.
I've taught something like 60 students now. I'm on my 4th academic year of teaching HR.
Amazing.
That, for me, was probably one of the biggest pushing myself out of my comfort zone massively to do that, to stand up in front of a class of 20 people and teach them HR. But the programme helped with that, and so did my mentor. He said, well, why can't you teach HR? You've got the knowledge, go and teach it.
Yeah.
So I have.
Good. Lovely. And sometimes you need to take that action to motivate yourself, don't you? You need to just like sort of get into the environment and see how you get on, and clearly it's worked well. Talk to me a little bit about how...
I'm telling you, it was terrifying. It was terrifying. I don't mind telling you that.
No, you know what? I think there's a fallacy, Lisa, that regardless of... weirdly, I was talking to Cassie about this morning. One of my pet hates is people who pretend that life is perfect, right? Because we're all going through challenges, and I think the interesting thing is... I'm reading a book at the minute. Again, I'm quite a big reader, so I'm reading a book at the minute called The School of Life by a philosopher by Alan de Botton, and it's an amazing, thoughtful, thought-inducing book. So I was reading this morning, got up early, I was doing a bit of reading this morning, said to Cass, there's an element in it that talks about the fallacy of perfection, you know, that talks about this fallacy where we go, if we do this, our life will be perfect. When in reality, it's all a journey, isn't it? You know, and you've got to enjoy the journey on the way. And if I'm honest, the first thing she said to me is, why are you talking to me about this at 7 a.m? I've got to get the kids ready for school. That was her first thing. But then we got into this conversation about... the importance of continuing to challenge yourself, but also not to take it like too seriously to a certain extent, because you know you've got to like sort of try stuff new to get those experiences, and what you've said has certainly sort of shown that as an example. Tell me a little bit about how HR has changed during COVID.
Well, it's really interesting actually, because I do feel that, you know, HR has been forgotten during COVID, and I don't mean we've forgotten to do our HR. That's not what I mean. What I mean is there's been a lot of HR people working themselves to death during this recent pandemic that everyone's forgotten about.
Right.
So I've seen that just from my own students, you know, because before I started this New Year's class of 13, I had 26 last year across 2 classes, which was huge. So when the pandemic hit, all my students were in HR roles, so we're all impacted because they're all from different industries. So you can imagine it's a real mixture of stuff coming to class, shock, disbelief, trying to support them. So, there's been a lot of these HR people behind the scenes still keeping going, making sure people are getting paid and all the
Yeah.
rest of it. So, there was that side of it, which I think no disrespect to our key workers because they're amazing, but when we thanked our key workers, in my head, I'm thanking
Yeah, you
them.
were clapping for the HR stuff. Well, I suppose the challenge you've got with that is everybody relies on the HR staff to look after, like the HR teams to look after everybody else, but who's looking after the HR teams?
After them,
Yeah,
exactly. So there's been that side of it in terms of where I've been tried to be very conscious of that with my students in terms of offering as much support as I could because I've basically said to all of them, if you can cope with this situation, you can cope with anything in
yeah,
the future. There is nothing you won't be able to do after this. But I think the other side of it is that things around that have bubbled up to the surface have been lots of different HR issues, particularly around the whole remote working situation, because of course we had no option other than to work at home. That's what we were told in March. Everyone go home. So there's all this chaos around setting up, but it's been done and it's been proved that people can work remotely. Not every single job. I'm not saying that's the case. But I think probably it's busted a bit of a myth for some employers around, oh no, they can't work from home because, and they can't work from home because of this or that, or the whole trust issue, which I understand that comes into it. However, I think that's blown that out of the water a bit in some respects because businesses have been supported at a distance by their workforce, HR plus everybody else, because we've all been scattered all over the place. And stuff has still kept going. Things
So,
are still.
so it's really interesting. I had a conversation with one of my clients who runs a business. He's a business leader in London. All of his team were furloughed. Sorry, not furloughed. Continue to work from home. And he said, "Look, we've seen a tiny drop in productivity. We've seen a little bit of productivity go down. But Chris, I'm saving myself millions of pounds in rent."
Exactly.
So,
You've got to weigh it all up, haven't you?
so there's pros and cons, isn't there? It's not a cut and dried thing. And I think like if you provide people with a bit more flexibility, they're likely to stay as well. So you've also got that issue around keeping good people around because you are being a bit more flexible.
And you've got to be like that in this environment because I had one student who was not only working from home, homeschooling her two children and studying her CIPD and cooking dinner at 6 o'clock every night.
Yeah.
So, it's people, the challenges that's thrown at all of us has been immense, some much more challenging than others. But I think it's probably demonstrated going forward that we can be a much more agile workforce than we ever thought we could be because the technology
100%.
allows us to do that now.
Yeah, 100%. You're right. So, talk to me about. I'm going to give you what I'm going to do, Lisa. Is I'm going to give you some magic powers, right? So I'm going to give you a magic wand, and if there's one thing you could change in businesses about how they treat their people and how HR departments work in firms, what would it be?
Okay, so I think in terms of the business approach, I'd like, for those businesses that don't quite understand it, and maybe they do more so now that we've been through this COVID experience, people are your most valuable asset, right? And your most expensive, usually next to the cost of your buildings, etc. They're your most valuable asset. So it's so important that if you've recruited the right people into the right roles for your business, that you then look after them. You then need a good sort of HR framework, and that includes the people working within the HR team who understand also that people are the most valuable asset. So we should be looking after their health and well-being in the workplace. and that we need to have the right sort of policies, procedures, ethos, culture, all of that stuff in order to make sure that we do look after our most valuable asset, which is our people. So it would be great to see more of that coming from, almost as a recognition of how people have coped with a pandemic and helped businesses to keep running as the consequence. So it'd be great if we could see that, if I could wave that magic wand and get a better recognition that people are your most valuable assets. So look after them. Once you've got good people, look after them. Because, at the end of the day, with good people in your business, it will thrive and it will flourish. So, you can't really do that if you don't look after them and recognise them for the value that they actually contribute. So that would be my magic wand moment in a perfect world.
So let me just chuck a potential sort of thing in the mix then. Let's say, for example, you've got a business leader, somebody who runs a business or is involved in managing people, who wants to do that, who knows sort of they're probably not doing things as well as they could be and needs to make improvement. What's the first action they should look at?
What I would do is, if they're looking to make an improvement in their business but they're not really sure how to go about it, they maybe think perhaps people could be a bit better engaged or a bit better motivated, ask your employees or your volunteers, your contractors, your employees, whoever you're using, ask the people, okay, what could we do to make this a better place to work? What could we improve? Because do you know what? Quite often there's some tiny little things that when you're at the top and you're very busy leading and doing all that strategic stuff, you don't always see the smaller stuff that's further buried in the business. Other people can point that out to you, even if it's a simple thing like, well, we've got nowhere to eat our lunch, for example. I know you can't always do that, but sometimes there is somewhere in the building you can convert into a small staff area for people to just go and have a half an hour break. That can make a massive difference, and it's only a small thing. So I would ask them, I would always ask, what could we do to improve your work experience with us? What would make it better?
Yeah, it's really interesting. The amount of firms that, because we've got corporate clients as well, that my colleague Charlie looks after, one of the things that we always realise when business leaders or owners or people who run businesses build their employee benefits packages, the employee benefits packages that employees are receiving to retain them, 9 times out of 10 they don't ask the employees who are meant to benefit what they want, and that seems a good starting point.
That's exactly, and it could be, well, we'd like to work a bit more flexibly, we'd like somewhere to sit and have a cup of coffee. I mean, I worked somewhere where people were doing like 11-hour shifts, and so during an 11-hour shift you need to have a hot meal, don't you? You need something, you need fuel to keep you going for 11 hours. There was nowhere for them to actually have a hot meal, like not even a microwave where they could go and heat it up. And they'd have to leave and go and have a break somewhere, which then costs money, and quite often, especially in a caring environment, people don't have, that pay's not particularly good. So if we can give people somewhere to have a dinner, or even provide the dinner, even better if you can, because it's not going to be a massive big thing for an organisation that's perhaps already cooking 30 meals for residents to actually give a few meals to their staff. It's stuff like that, Chris, that doesn't fall under your normal employee benefit package, like your employee assistance program and your
100%. 100%.
Not everyone wants that.
100%. And
they just want somewhere to put their feet up for half an hour and take a breath before they carry on with their day job.
And it's some of those quicker fixes that without asking you'd never know.
No, and massive wins at the end of it. You can see such a difference, and it's some of that small stuff that makes a big impact.
100%.
That's what it is.
No, I really like that. So Lisa, thanks for joining us today. I've really enjoyed it. I've learnt loads, as I typically do when I do these interviews. But help our audience understand where they can find out a little bit more about you, your business, and how to get in touch.
Okay, thank Thank you, Chris. Well, our website is www.hrfitforpurpose.co.uk, or you can email me at info@hrfitforpurpose.co.uk, or give me a call on 07761 072 515. We always do, an initial free consultation with any of our potential clients. So, people are welcome to get in touch and have a chat if there's something they think we can help with.
Amazing. Lisa, thank you very much and have a lovely day.
Thank you, Chris, and you. Lovely to see you. Bye for now.
So that was our interview with Lisa. Hopefully you've enjoyed the tips that I've shared about the 4 things that you should do as a business owner to make sure you're going to be okay. Certainly Lisa provided a lot of insight in her interview. That's it for Cervello Live this week. Have a lovely week and we'll see you next time.